With the help of Caunabo's brother, Maniocatex, Beecho tried to rescue Caunabo from La Forte Isabela at least 5 times, but Ojeda always managed to defeat them. As all of these things are unfolding, there's one person who isn't mentioned. The beautiful Anacaona is not mentioned in these beginnings of this tale. However, she later on becomes such an important figure that even to this day, we still speak about her, we still admire what she did and how she tried to free her people from a violent encounter with the Spanish. We don't know much about Anacaona's early life. However, what we do know from Taino childhood, we also know that as a cacique's daughter, she lived inside the cane. So in basically their sort of temple where the semi of the Yucayeque was located. So she would have seen her father perform caoba ceremonies, go into a trance, and communicate with the ancestral spirit. She would have also been taught all of the secrets of the caciques and how to get that connection or go into that connection in order to speak with the semis. We know that she would have been trained in everything: archery, weapons, pottery, cooking. She would have learned absolutely everything in order to be able to best lead her people. But what Anacaona was most renowned for was her ability to compose and sing areito. Even Bartolomé de las Casas describes how wonderfully she would perform them. And she was so renowned that even more than 20 years later, they were still speaking about her abilities to perform areito. That would tell us several things about her: that she was very intelligent, one; two, that she had a very powerful mind, because in order to perform areitos, you had to memorize every single letter, every single lyric from that song. Because remember, the Tainos did not have a physical writing system. So every single performance was made from her mind. She didn't have anything to guide her. And it could have been that this great ability is what made her a center of attention. Not everybody could perform areitos in that particular way. She was probably known as a tequina, which is of Taino word meaning teacher. Tequinas were always the leaders of the areitos, and everybody followed their lead. It could have been during the areitos that she caught the eye of Caunabo. But as I explained in his own episode, Caunabo was not a Taino. And in order to marry the daughter of a cacique, he had to be a cacique himself. But because he was a foreigner, he had to go through certain tests to prove that he was worthy of her hand. It's possible that as she performed, she could see him eyeing her. She could feel his interest. And mind you, she had to be pretty young. She had to be a teenager at this time. But we all know what it feels like to have that sort of connection with someone. So because Caunabo had to fulfill more requirements than the normal person, he had to be brought to La Profetisa Joima. As I explained in Caunabo's episode, Joima was La Profetisa de la Isla, and to her were brought many people. But she was mainly used as an advisor for the caciques and cacicas. Caunabo was brought to her in order to be approved. She had him pass certain tests, she looked for certain skills. But what we can ask ourselves, better said, if Anacaona, Pecho, and her dad, Concatequa, had to be present. Because it was because of Anacaona that he was being presented to Joima. But if they managed to go, they would have had to purify themselves. They had to do certain ceremonies, certain diets. But either way, we can imagine her thinking, whether she was there or if Anacaona was back at home in Jaragua, waiting, she would have still had that feeling of did he pass. I'm sure she was nervous, anxious to know if this man would end up being her husband. But Canavo passed, and Joima crowned him el cacique de la Maguana. Bartolomé de las Casas says que Anacaona fue una notable mujer, muy prudente, muy graciosa y palanciana en sus hablas y artes y meneos, y amicísima de los cristianos. Fue también reina de la Maguana, porque fue mujer del rey Caunabo. So we can imagine Anacaona's excitement to know that this was going to be her husband and that he had the qualities of a leader. Since we aren't sure about how marriages and partnership work with the Tainos, it isn't 100% certain if Anacaona ended up having to move to La Maguana or if she was allowed to stay in Jaragua. What we do know is that when Caunabo was captured in 1495, she wasn't there.